Hello there. Today I'm fortunate enough to be in Hermitage in the Northern Rhone. So this is the city that sits at the bottom of the Hermitage hill, and I'm here, as you can possibly see from the display behind me, with Domaine Paul Jaboulet. And the wine I have in my glass at the moment is the 2018 vintage, one of their most important wines, Domaine de Thalabert. That's a Crozes Hermitage. So it's a wine that's 100% Syrah. But this is the estate that started everything for the Jaboulet family. In 1834 they acquired this. It's now a 40-hectare estate right in the middle of the Crozes Hermitage appellation, in the section that's on the plain to the south of Hermitage. It's probably quite easy to acquire such a large plot altogether, as there was no Crozes Hermitage appellation at the time back in 1834. However, Domaine de Thalabert built a very special reputation and helped build the reputation of the Jaboulet family, and I think it's still reckoned to be one of the top Crozes Hermitage that you'll encounter. So the estate is on clay soils with loess and a large proportion of large, rounded, great glacially deposited stone. It sits at about 120 to 140 metres above sea level, not because it's necessarily on a hill, it's on a plain, but because in this section of the Rhône Valley we are that far above sea level. The Jaboulet family own the company that bears their name for over 170 years, but in 2006, following the death of the head of the family, Jaboulet, in 1997, and various disputes amongst the rest of the family, the company was actually sold off to the Frey family. Jean-Jacques Frey, a Swiss billionaire who'd made his money with property development, and his daughter Caroline, who was in 2006 was a newly qualified oenologist from the University of Bordeaux. And they set about investing in the property and really turning around the quality. There'd been perceived to have been quite a serious slide in quality at Jaboulet, and the Frey family in the last 18 years have done an awful lot to address that, and I think it's arguable that the company is now making wines that are at least in the position that they had been prior to its decline. Now, investing in the company has meant refitting the cellars with the latest equipment, but it's also seen a lot of work in the vineyards. Caroline is a huge believer in organic viticulture and in sustainability. So for instance, in the middle of this 40-hectare estate, there's actually a hectare and a half of a biodiversity refuge called the Clos du Gournon, in which they have beehives, they have bat boxes, bird boxes, and everything is being done to encourage as much biodiversity as possible, right in the heart of these vineyards. The other part of their project, and that relates to where we are now, their Vignes, which is a shop come restaurant selling their wares in the middle of Tain, is that they have a kitchen garden there, and everything that is grown on that property comes here to go to be used in the kitchens. So that's food which is incredibly fresh. It's picked that same morning, but with almost no carbon footprint at all. The fruit was picked by hand. It was sorted into 12 kg capacity cagettes, or cages, or baskets, whatever you want to call them, so that the fruit's not getting damaged in its transport to the winery. At the winery, it's entirely destemmed. Fermentation goes on for 4 weeks, and they're aiming for gentle extraction. So presumably the temperature is being kept down reasonably well, and they won't be doing too much pushing down or pumping over. And that would make sense because this was actually quite a ripe vintage. Finally, the wine aged in French oak, 20% of which was new, and that was for about a year. The preceding vintage, 2017, had been a very dry vintage. 2017-18 vintage only had moderate rain, and by the beginning of the growing season, there was actually still a water deficit. There'd been a very cool winter, and that didn't actually start to warm up until April. So budburst and flowering came later than usual. At this stage, the season was quite warm and quite wet, and there was a lot of mildew pressure. However, the warmth speeded the season up again. A little August rainfall enabled the vines to finish ripening and to get those tannins completely ripe. Picking was able to go ahead at a normal sort of date in September. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say about it, you've got a medium to deep ruby red colour. There's a purplish hint to it. I can just see through the wine, but it is fairly deep and dark. Swirling it, The wine has 14% alcohol, and it's actually so dense it's clinging, and it's only very slowly creating tears on the side of the glass there. The aromas. The aromas are beautifully typical of good Crozes Hermitage and good Syrah. There's a lot going on here. You've got meaty notes, spicy notes, and you've got very ripe, high ripeness fruit. There's a deep, dark, ripe black cherry note that underpins everything, and that goes on to slight notes of raisin and prune. There are spicy, peppery notes at the finish. There's plenty going on here. It's opening as I'm smelling it. It's fabulous that we're getting both the sort of developed notes along with the primary fruit notes here at this stage. So that's for taste. The wine's dry and fresh. It's the front of the mouth, there's a meatiness. There may be the tiniest touch of bread, but actually that sort of slight barnyardy note is being overwhelmed by that sort of rich, dark cherry fruit. So if it is, that's not a huge problem. There's a fairly obvious black pepper spice. The acidity, although it doesn't seem to be particularly high, is enough to keep the fruit lovely and juicy. So you've got this initially black cherry, then ripe red cherry, then going through to mulberry, lovely juicy fruit right across the mid palate. The structure, there's a tiny bit of drying structure there, but actually for the most part it's smooth, it's almost chocolatey, there might be a touch of velvetiness, but there's not a particularly astringent grip there. The alcohol at 14% is giving a bit of warmth, but it's not sufficient to overpower the rich fruit that's making up that mid palate, and that carries on giving this sort of lovely juicy black to red fruit right to the finish of the wine. Now looking at our Wine Searcher average score, this got a 92 out of 100. I think that's a reasonable score, but I don't really think it reflects the fact that this is a wine that's coming up to 6 years old, still has a youthful nature, and is starting to show a good amount of development. Perhaps when it was young, it didn't show that potential. So possibly if this was retasted now, one or two of those critics might upgrade it, but 92 is not a bad score. I think it does show the innate quality of Thalabert. I think also it shows the improvements that have been put in the 10 years prior to this wine being made that the Frey family have owned this property. I think this is a wine that is probably good for 10 years. I would reckon likely longer than that. But its concentration and its balance I think should allow it to age fairly well. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It would be fantastic to have your support. If you have any comments you want to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. It would be great to hear your views on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you had friends you think might like to watch the video, please do pass it on to them. I will, as usual, leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine in the notes below. So you can follow that, you can see where the wine's available in your market, what its pricing is. You can look at some of the background details we've got for it, some of the critics' notes, and even its price history. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, do please try and take some time and come and join us for another tasting in the near future. Bye for now.